Hey, you guys, welcome back to another Flickers of Fear movie review. So, this one. Here we go. Okay, so starting probably a couple weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago, I started hearing a lot of people in the horror community, and some of you guys talked about it as well. But everybody seemed like they were suddenly talking about this Spanish movie from 2022 called The Coffee Table. Now, according to a lot of reviews that I saw, this was one of the most traumatizing movies like to come out in a long time. So, because of all the buzz about how fucked up it supposedly is, you knew that I was gonna have to get around to watching it like eventually because evidently I hate joy and happiness and want to make myself feel bad for no discernible reason. You know, so grab some snacks. Actually, some sour cream and onion Pringles to be specific, and just dove right in one pleasant Sunday afternoon, which, unbeknownst to me, was about to become significantly less pleasant. So I'm gonna say right up front. Now, although The Coffee Table is, like most movies, I talk about this a lot, better when you go into it not knowing anything about it, the subject matter of this one might make it an exception to that rule. This is one of those movies that I feel like most people would probably want to know at least partially what was going to happen so they can decide if they even want to watch it in the first place. You know what I'm saying? And honestly, I can't say I blame you if you don't want to watch it because this was one of the most anxiety inducing horror films that I've ever sat through. It doesn't have anything to do with violence or gore or anything like that, which doesn't really bother me all that much. It's just kind of the entirety of how disturbing the situation is that kind of did the number on me. And apparently it did a number on most other people who watched it as well. So just like for context, let's take a look at some of the adjectives that I saw that were used to describe this, like various other places on the internet. Bleak, gruesome, devastating, mean-spirited, unbearably cruel, makes you feel sick for nearly 90 minutes. And if that doesn't really accurately convey the vibe that this thing gives off, consider also that multiple reviewers also compared The Coffee Table to the aftermath of that scene from Hereditary. You all know what scene I'm talking about, but extended to feature length. Okay? And that's a very accurate summation. This film also gave me a similar sensation of kind of compounding dread as the 2022 Danish feel bad movie Speak No Evil, which I reviewed elsewhere on this channel. So, does all of that sound like a good time to you? Yes, then have at it. If no, probably you might want to take a hard pass on this one. So, given all of that, like what I just said, I will be discussing some major plot points, actually, the major plot point about The Coffee Table, just as a sort of trigger warning, I guess. If you would really rather watch the movie without knowing anything about it, then you go for it. Don't say I didn't warn you, though. Just come back and watch this review after you watch it so we can process our shared trauma together. Now, interestingly, this movie is billed pretty much everywhere, like only secondarily as a horror film. It's almost everywhere billed first as a black comedy. And I know the Spanish are different than us, like culturally, but trust me when I say that if this is meant to be a comedy, it is a pitch black comedy, if that. There are some kind of darkly funny-ish moments, but on the whole, this is the kind of like queasy, super uncomfortable funny where you're kind of laughing, but you're kind of screaming and sort of feeling like you're going to throw up, like all at the same time. And also where you suspect that even thinking about laughing at the horrific circumstances you're watching makes you a complete psychopath. And I honestly think that most normal people will not find anything about this funny in the slightest. It's a little hard to explain, but at some points while I was watching this movie, I was sitting in my office chair, the same chair, and I kind of had my knees like pulled up to my chest and my fists were my mouth like that, and I was sort of like wheeze laughing kind of, and then I kept repeating like, oh my god, it's awful, oh no, oh no, and I was just kept doing that. I will note also that I had to take multiple breaks because the sustained tension of this movie was giving me a stomach ache, so make of that what you will. So this was directed by Calle Casas. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that sort of correctly. And as I said, this is a Spanish film. The story of the coffee table is pretty simple, pretty straightforward. At the beginning, we're introduced to a married couple named Jesus and Maria, and they're at this kind of bargain furniture warehouse type of place, and they're haggling with this kind of seedy, kind of desperate seeming salesman over the titular coffee table, which they're thinking about purchasing. They're accompanied also by their newborn baby son in a stroller. He just looks like a couple months old or something like that. So this extended opening sequence in this furniture store kind of fills us in on the dynamic at play with this couple. Now, Jesus is bizarrely insistent on purchasing this expensive but kind of tacky piece of furniture. And it comes to light that this is probably mainly because he feels like he doesn't have any control over anything in his life anymore and wants to maintain some illusion that his choices and his opinions still matter. Maria, on the other hand, absolutely cannot stand the sight of this kind of quasi Art Deco looking monstrosity of a coffee table. And she starts like pushing back like very aggressively, like at the salesman's kind of absurd claims about how classy it is. And it's like, oh, the glass top is nearly unbreakable. And he's obviously trying to give him the hard sell. And she's like kind of being an asshole and like not going along with it. So as this whole exchange continues, and the pair start getting like madder and madder at each other, it kind of also is revealed that Jesus was not really ready to have a child, and he starts making like passive aggressive swipes at the horrible name that the wife chose for the kid, which was actually her grandfather's name. I think it was Cayetano. Now, Maria, who is admittedly pretty unpleasant, but maybe understandably so, like she was kind of a dick, but I could see where she was coming from. She had apparently been wanting a child for years. She's clearly older, so she's of an age where that's not going to be possible much longer, obviously. And so she had, started to get frustrated and kind of tired of waiting for Jesus to kind of get his shit together, you know what I mean? So, in short, like, Jesus seems to resent his wife for, essentially forcing him into fatherhood, and by extension, probably resents his baby son as well. While Maria obviously adores her son, but resents Jesus for his ambivalence, and I guess like what she perceives as his failure to like step up as a man, So finally, Jesus kind of drops his nuts and decides, I'm going to buy this table. After Maria, like they argue about it for a long time, and she just gives up in disgust and like leaves the store. So he's like, all right, well, I'm going to buy it. Now, after she leaves, like the salesman actually admits, oh, I lied. I don't really like this table, because he was like, oh, I have one just like this in my house. You know what I mean? Like all that kind of bullshit. But he does say, I think that buying this table will fill your home with happiness. Now, the cruel irony of this statement will resonate throughout the remainder of this movie. So the table shows up. It's in a big box and everything. You have to like assemble it like IKEA shit. You know what I mean? And so Jesus is like pushing this big heavy thing like in its box, like up these multiple flights of stairs to where their apartment is. Now at this stage in the movie, we're introduced, there's a little bit of a subplot, because we kind of get introduced to this 13-year-old girl, I think her name is Ruth, and she lives upstairs. Now she thinks that she's in love with Jesus, and she very aggressively insists that she knows that he loves her back. Like she pretty much misinterprets every harmless gesture of his toward her as evidence that he's in love with her, and we need to tell your wife how you feel about me, and it's all that other, and she just like will not take no for an answer. So I mean, he's trying to like fend her off, obviously, because she's a little kid, but just her troublesome presence is gonna just hover around the edges of the tragedy that is about to unfold. So Jesus starts putting the table together, but soon realizes, to his annoyance, that one of the screws for fastening the glass top to the base is missing, which is, typical. So he calls the salesman at the furniture store and kind of chews him out, and he's just like, look, this is some bullshit. You gave me this big line about this fucking table, and now it doesn't have a screw. So it's like, you need to bring a screw to my house, like, ASAP, so I can finish putting this thing together. Now, Maria, who's still there at this point, and she's just way past irritated by this whole fucking deal. And so she keeps making comments about how stupid he was for buying this ugly ass table. He's an idiot. And, you know, you're basically getting what you deserve for buying this stupid fucking thing. Now, it so happens that Jesus's brother, Carlos, and his new 18-year-old girlfriend, much, much younger. Actually, Maria even calls him your pedo brother is coming over. His girlfriend's 18. So they're going to be coming for a visit like that afternoon to meet the new baby. So Maria needs to go to the grocery store to get like food and wine for them. So she tells Jesus that she is leaving the baby with him because look, she's the mom. She's been caring for this little baby since he was born, and she just wants to have a couple of hours to herself, which, fair enough. This will be the first time that Jesus has been left alone with the child. And spoiler alert, it will also be the last. Now, pretty much the minute Maria leaves the apartment, the baby starts crying. And so Jesus picks him up and kind of carries him around trying to comfort him, but it's obviously not working. And then, long story short, Jesus somehow stumbles over the partially assembled coffee table with the baby in his arms. And the baby is cleanly beheaded by the broken glass. Now, you don't actually see it happen. What they do is like there's a shot like of the long hallway, like from the front door to the living room, and it kind of happens over here. Like in the living room, there's like a door, you can't see it. But also like we hear the shattering of the glass and the abrupt stopping of the baby's crying. And I kind of found this worse than actually seeing it because you could like imagine it. And then when you see the aftermath of it, it just compounds just the split second, just the overwhelming horror of that situation. Because the baby's like headless body is just laying there with this big pane of bloody glass like that. And the head has rolled under a nearby chair. Now, I just want to say, like, right here, the guy that plays Jesus, his name is David Pareja. He is just chef's kiss. He is, like, perfect in this movie. His face at this moment just portrays this shocked blankness. But then, like, behind that, like, in his eyes, you can see, like, this terrible realization that something has happened and he can't fix it. And so you can like almost see the wheels like turning in his head. It's like wishing he could go back a couple of seconds and undo it, but then realizing with just this kind of dawning devastation that there is like nothing left now but just this horrible, grim, like far-reaching outcome of this tiny, tiny mistake. So the rest of the movie's runtime is Jesus trying to conceal this accident like for as long as possible. Almost as if there's going to be some way of correcting it or coming back from it, which obviously there isn't. He goes to the upstairs neighbors for cleaning supplies to try to get rid of some of the blood. And he puts the baby's like headless corpse in the crib and then closes the nursery door. And in this kind of like absurdly horrible, but still like totally understandable and I don't know, relatable is the right word, but you understand why it happens. He can't actually bring himself to touch the baby's severed head, and so he leaves it like under the chair. Now, eventually, of course, the man from the furniture store shows up with the screw, and he's like I said, he's kind of desperate and friendless, and so he way overstays his welcome, and like Jesus is just desperately trying to get rid of him. Then Maria comes home and starts making food for their guests. And she noticed that Jesus is kind of sweating and he's just talking in monosyllables. And he's just like claims, oh, I'm not really feeling well. And she's like, I'm going to go check on the baby. And she's like, no, it took so long for me to like get him to sleep. Please don't disturb him and all this other kind of stuff. So he's kind of like trying to, just even though there's no way, it's like they're going to find out, you know what I mean? But it's just kind of like he's trying to put it off because he just like doesn't know what to do. You know what I mean? It's like, it's just heart wrenching, like to watch it. And then, like, shortly after that, like, Carlos and Christina, like, his brother and, well, she's not really his sister-in-law because they're not married, but you know what I mean? They show up, and then there's, like, whole new fucking minefields to navigate, like, with that whole situation. So, the whole kind of, like, oppressive atmosphere of the story from that point forward comes from you as the audience knowing that the discovery of the baby's grisly, horrible death is inevitable, obviously, but you don't know like when it's going to happen and what the exact repercussions of it are going to be. Now, I don't have any human children myself. I do have several fur babies, obviously, but I could see parents of small kids or infants having a real hard time watching this movie, because I don't, like I said, I don't even have human children, and I had a hard time watching it, because this is something that could absolutely happen in real life, and it's just like just the impact of just this tiny, you just trip over something. It happens every day, and it's just like the whole rest of your life is fucking ruined. You know what I mean? It's just the impact of that like really stuck with me. And I think it was like the believability of it that made it so harrowing and so sickening to watch. You know what I mean? And the whole ghastly situation is like made even worse by the fact that the characters other than Jesus, they're all in the apartment, and they're just obliviously like talking about the baby because they think the baby's still alive, obviously, even though the baby's head is like yards away, like under this fucking chair, and they don't see it. Now, I will note that I saw some reviewers thought the ending was too abrupt, which I think is a weird criticism. I don't agree with that assessment at all. To be honest, I think it ended probably the only possible way it could have. And honestly, when the crucial revelation comes, like when, the baby's death is discovered, obviously, it was actually like a relief. And I don't think I realized, I did kind of, but I didn't realize the extent of it, like how fucking ill and how tensed up that I was feeling the whole time I was watching this movie, until, the end came and like they saw what happened, because just the whole pressure of watching Jesus like navigate this horrendous predicament that he was in, like all that pressure was released at once, and it was almost kind of like, it was the weirdest. I don't know. I will say this is a brilliant film, but it is not an experience that I would care to repeat. So I'm gonna say that even though this was awesome, I will probably never watch it again. Now, I'm sure that there's going to be like some horror fans out there who aren't affected at all by this movie, because that always happens. I am not ashamed today to say that I am not one of those people that was not affected by this. I couldn't even sit through the whole thing in one go. I had to keep getting up and walking around like to decompress, like, because the whole thing is just this brutal like onslaught of misery, and it's just like the stress of it was just too much. I couldn't take it, so I had to keep like getting up and walking around and doing something else. I'm glad I watched it, but it kept me up kind of late that night too. Like I was kind of still thinking about it. I thought it was actually going to give me nightmares. It thankfully hasn't, not yet anyway. It might be waiting a couple of days we'll see how that goes. I mean, that might be just me. I'm going to say like beheading has always freaked me out big time ever since I was a kid. That's like one of the fucking worst things I can imagine. And I get like really freaked out like thinking about it. So the whole inciting incident of this movie like just disturbed the fuck out of me from the get-go. And then the fact that I had to spend the next 80 odd minutes just kind of wallowing in the just impact of this incident, it stressed me out so much that I kind of felt like I wanted to hurl. So yeah, obviously this is a difficult movie to recommend to anyone for obvious reasons. But in spite of how kind of soul crushing it is, the quality is excellent. As I said, the acting is just perfect. It's top notch. The cinematography is really interesting, really impactful. And the story is simple, but I mean, it really kind of goes in for the kill and just like rubs your face in the anguish. You know what I mean? It just makes you sit with it. And I think that's really like the true definition of horror. This really affected me quite a lot. So, I mean, if that just sounds like the regular day at the office to you, then you might be the intended audience for this. But if that doesn't sound like a fun time, then please exercise extreme caution, because, like I said, it's not super violent or super gory or anything like that. It's just really, really soul-crushing and devastating, and just makes you, like, feel really bad and really stressed. And if that's not something you want to experience, then I would not recommend it. It is a great fucking movie, though. So that will do it for this Tomes of Terror. Thanks as always for watching. Remember, like, share, subscribe, and comment if you enjoyed this video. And I'll see you guys again on the next one. Bye.